Phoenix Suns got a new coach. It's Mike Budenholzer. We just moving these fellas around, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, you're not doing your job so well right now. We're going to fire you. And then it's like a year later, it's like, hey, you won a championship, didn't you? Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're going to fire this other dude who won a championship, Frank Vogel, and maybe we'll hire you. This is the way we're doing it. Here's my question for you. How often does this actually work? How often does a coach come in and, like, actually get notably better results with a roster that is more or less the same roster the previous guy was working with?
The only thing that I would, and I agree with you completely, with Budenholzer, I think you look back on it now and say maybe they shouldn't have fired him in Milwaukee.
Like the 100%.
Yeah.
Unless internally, Giannis is like, I can't work with this guy anymore, something like that. Like that's always like, it doesn't matter what you think from the outside. If Giannis Antetokounmpo says, I want a new coach, then you just have to get a new coach. So if there's that type of thing, like star player, I get that. But here's the truth. When you have problems in an NBA franchise, the easiest thing to do is just change the coach. I just don't think it's effective.
Like, how big of a difference is this going to make? Will they get to the second round?
Well, it's like, well, you hear, Frank Vogel, he lost the locker room. We probably lost the locker room in part because the team sucked, all right? Because when the team sucks, you start to lose the locker room. So if the team sucks again, you know who will lose the locker room next? Mike Budenholzer, right? Right?
Yep, it's true.
Any of this Kevin Durant's fault? People on ESPN this morning, they were calling him a coach killer.
I mean, he has had a lot of coaches.
He's had 6 coaches since he left Golden State. 6 since he left Golden State.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you put all the clearly that's a trend, right? You can't ignore that. But I don't know if you put all the blame on him just because, to your point, like that's when things go wrong and you have star players like that, the first thing any franchise is going to do is fire the coach.
Right. So, so Frank Vogel
might just be because he's a star and is on teams that are supposed to be good.
Yeah. It's just a weird situation in Phoenix now. Like, whatever. Like, I'm not even arguing that firing Frank Vogel was wrong or hiring Mike Budenholzer was wrong. Like, they got a championship level coach. Perhaps they've upgraded at coach. Whatever. The idea, like, as long as, because the owner earlier, the Phoenix owner earlier this week, he was like, you saw this, 26 teams would trade spots with us right now. No,
they would not.
No, they wouldn't. Maybe 4. Would, something like that.
Yeah.
The number is much lower. So then he's like, hey, everything's great. Then 3 days later, they fire their coach, and now they get Mike Budenholzer. And you know what? As long as they've still got more or less the same roster they had this season, next season, they'll still fall short of expectations or not live up to what everybody thought they would be when you go out and make the Kevin Durant trade and the Bradley Beal trade. And then we'll be talking about, do they need to make another coaching change? That's the way the NBA works, right?
Yeah, it does.
I really do think there's something to be said for stability and for front offices standing behind coaches and players rallying around coaches instead of blaming them. And what's a pretty good example of that? Right here in Memphis. The players seem to support Taylor.
Right.
And not question him. And the front office stood by him. And that's why even as this season we got to a point where the injuries were so overwhelming, it was like nobody was even really caring anymore.
Right.
But there was a moment in this season where people were asking questions about Taylor Jenkins. Like, we get it, Josh suspended, but should this team be better even with Josh suspended? But internally it felt like those conversations never really got to the place the fans were having them.
Yes.
Because the front office believes in the coach and the players seem to believe in the coach, and that's a great place to start, right? If you are running an NBA franchise or a Major League any franchise, and every time something doesn't go the way you needed it to go, the first move is coaching change. I don't know that that's effective.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you could never make a coaching change. Sometimes change is needed. But I think if you can ride through the bumps a little bit, you're often better off for it. Miami's a great example of that with Eric Spoelstra. But NBA franchises don't tend to ride through the bumps. Things get bumpy and they make coaching changes.
Yeah.
A lot of people getting buyout money, though, so that's good.
Right, yeah. No, there's that.
The Gary Parrish Show, live weekdays at 10 a.m.